I am having the best day ever. In this video, I'm in Exeter, New South Wales, driving an Austin Kimberley. I'm in Australia driving an Austin Kimberley. Woo! Yes, that noise means I am properly excited about this. This is a major box ticking exercise. This is one of the main reasons I came to the other side of the world. It's so I could drive an Austin Kimberley. Here we go. Quad headlamps, indicators and side lights under the bumper here. Austin badge, Kimberley badge. Kimberley. I've even got a proper Aussie spec sunroof, sun visor going on. My words are struggling a little because I am so excited. So what is an Austin Kimberley? It was developed by Leyland Australia. It uses the Landcrab as its base, which is why the doors may look a little familiar. They have been slightly modified because Australian regulations at the time insisted you had smooth door handles, not sticky out ones. So these we used, these different handles on Minis as well over here. But otherwise, those are the famous Landcrab Maxi Austin 3 litre doors. But Leyland Australia knew they needed a proper saloon. So rather than the truncated rear of the original Landcrab, which for those unfamiliar is the Austin 1800/2200, that was launched in 1964, I think, back in the UK. Isogonus's third major design. Of course, he did the Mini, then the BMC 1100, and then the 1800. And this is a Mark II, which means you get a black panel here on the back and a few detail improvements. But otherwise, under the skin, it is mostly very similar to a Landcrab. There is one key difference, which we will get to in a moment. But yeah, using Landcrab underpinnings, it floats on fluid. It has hydrolastic suspension. It has front wheel drive. It did have a sister, the X6 models. You could choose a Kimberley, which was the plush luxurious one, or a Tasman, which was a little bit more simple, had a bench front seat and single headlamps. Yeah, this is quite extraordinary. The lengths they went to try and build a car that would really suit Australian conditions. Unfortunately, they didn't really. 12,100 I think were built, Kimberleys and Tasmans, and they just failed, shut up plane, to really ignite much success here. People were scared by the odd transverse engine, the hydrolastic suspension, and yeah, generally they ran away and went and bought Chryslers, Fords and Holdens instead. Plug hole of despair on the lovely wheel trims. Also, this one seems to have some ex-serviceman history going on. It was in the Royal Automobile Association for South Australia. So this front end is longer in more ways than one. There's actually a slight increase in wheelbase to about 2.5 inches. So extended front gives a bit more room under the bonnet. And at one stage, Leyland were giving very serious thought to using this body for an update of the Landcrab in the UK, where people were yeah, not necessarily enamoured with the quirky looks of the Landcrab, that truncated rear with the hugely wide styling. That's why they got called Landcrabs, whereas this is a much more balanced design. It looks better to the eye. It doesn't look so hideously wide. That extra bit of length really balances out the looks, and that was kind of the problem with Isogonus. He was not a stylist, and I think some people think he probably was because the Morris Minor became such an iconic design. But if Isogonus had had his way, the Minor would have been a couple of inches narrower. There's a lovely badge there. I'm not sure what it represents necessarily, but it's very nice. It's registered as a historic vehicle. You get different number plates here, and I quite like these indicator side light lamps. We'll get a better look at those in a moment. But before we have a look at the gorgeous red vinyl interior, we should have a poke under the bonnet, but I need both hands to open the bonnet, so we shall just do that. And there we go, the bonnet is open. And here we see the interesting thing in here. This is the E6 Transverse 6-cylinder engine, and this was the first use of it. Australia was often a test bed. The Morris Nomad, which I hope to do a video on, was the first car to use the E4 engine, overhead cam design, and that was used ahead of going in the Maxi. It actually first saw use down under. It's a Siamese engine. The two middle cylinders have no water jacket between them, because it was a bit of a challenge, but it's effectively a 6-cylinder version of the 1.5 litre engine, which takes it up to 2,227 cc. There is a single carburettor. Mark 1's had twin carburettors, and also there's an electric cooling fan, which was I don't think that's a genuine cable tie. That was, I think, the first BMC car or British Leyland car to use an electric cooling fan. Certainly of the transverse engine types. The original Landcrab followed on the tradition of the Mini and the 1100 by having a side mounted radiator. I think it's a long time since I've looked under the bonnet of an 1800, but that's what I reckon. So all the Kimberleys and Tasmans were 6 cylinders. Also slightly interesting brakes. Look at this for a routing. We have a twin cylinder setup over here on the master, and we've got front brakes and rear brakes separately. There is a load sensing valve, or not a load sensing valve, a limiting valve to reduce the power to the rears, but the pipe goes over here to a second cylinder on the brake booster, and there's the pipe for the servo, get the vacuum pressure to make all that function, and the servo only operates on the front brakes. So that's one front brake, that's the other one. There's a modern box here because the owner doesn't quite trust the fan on this car, so he's got it set to come on a little earlier, but really quite serviceable. Here's the distributor, nice and easy to reach. These alternators down there, big old oil filter down the bottom. Everything seems pretty straightforward, but I guess to Australian tastes it was all a bit weird and unusual, and people couldn't really get on with it, which is a great shame. I'm going to start the engine just so you can hear it under here. I've left the car in neutral deliberately for this point. And listen to that, it is a lovely smooth engine. Look, it's been hot run tested and electronically tuned. The cooling fan is whizzing around on the back. There is a very slight exhaust manifold leak for which the owner apologised, but frankly I was expecting worse than that when he told me. But a lovely smooth engine, does sound good. Can I get this down on my own? No, I need two hands because I've got to release this little clip. If we step aboard, first of all, nice and solid in a proper classic style, you'll see we've got a right hand handbrake. We've got the reddest interior I think I've ever seen in my life, and it is all vinyl, which I find quite remarkable. This car was developed in Australia and they gave it vinyl seats. I don't understand that one either. We've got winding windows and a handle that feels a bit more robust than the one in a 3 litre. Look at that, huge buckets for storing your Castlemaine 4X. Other beers are available. That was definitely the seat and not my bottom. Got the Austin Flying A on the pedals, loads of space, no severe transmission tunnel because the transmission is in the front. It's in the sump of the engine. It is way out of the way. So it's, yeah, the clutch is on this end of the engine and takes drive down through drop down gears to the gearbox, and it's a proper clunky old affair as well, and you lift across and into reverse. It's a shame it makes so much noise because it's a nice precise gear lever really. The only slight issue is there is an armrest which completely gets in the way, so but you can kind of almost select the gears without moving your elbow, so maybe that's not too bad. A few extra gauges going on, a little clock which is wrong, and what's going on with the battery. Over here extra gauges for amps, oil pressure and vacuum as well. I'm not really sure what the point of that is. That just tells you you've got some vacuum, which is nice. Indicator's right, as is the Australian preference, and it has to be said, this dashboard I think is really nice, much more modern from what you got in an ordinary Landcrab. The glass on, oh yeah, I see, that is the glass. It comes out to a point here. I was going to say, it does feel a bit odd. It plays tricks with your eyes as you move around the speedometer. But yeah, that's where the glass is, and it sort of spreads out back to the edges, and that does the same. That's all a bit peculiar, and I apologise for that gratuitous groping shot. Heater controls over here. There is a 2-speed fan, oh the luxury. There is a radio here, and also a cassette player. It's only rock and roll by Status Quo. Yeah, that's probably apt, to be honest. That's got its own volume control as well. And oh, let's see if it works. Oh, we need the ignition on for that. There we go. Oh, I can hear the fan running. That's quite enough of that. I think it's fair to say that speaker technology has come a long way since then. Little ashtray, 12-volt power outlet, or cigarette lighter as we used to call them in the old days. Little glove box, which is impossible to open with one hand. That's not the best design ever, so, but it has one. And switch gear for various functions. Lights over here. There's your 2-speed fan. Hazard lights, which don't seem to work anymore. That's interesting, they were working. Oh, apparently we need the ignition on to have the indicator going, and there goes the fan again. But yeah, indicator lights very dimly lit here and here. And then of course we come to wipers, and this is perhaps the most exciting part. I'm in Australia operating the wipers on an Austin Kimberley. Woo! Screen wash! Oh yeah, there is some, it's going everywhere. And wipers, there we go. Now, to be honest, I don't really need to bother with this too much, because it's exactly the same wipers as you get in an Austin 3 litre, and I drove one of those last week. The only slight difference is, oh no, it is the same, sorry, I'm getting confused with the Westminster, which had wipers that parked off the screen. This doesn't have that. But yeah, a fair wiping performance for the day. No pantograph wiper action, but you can't have everything. But a nice comfortable seat. So you get head restraints as well, which was fairly unusual for the time, as well as this big chunky armrest. We get Leyland branded static seat belts, so there's no inertia reel, and they're red as well. So those who thought an MG Metro was the first car to have red seat belts, ain't necessarily so. And a lovely Kimberley there, just to remind you. But yeah, it's a lovely driving position. The pedals are slightly offset, the throttle is slightly towards the middle. Oh, let's turn the ignition on, just see what that sounds like. Broken is what that sounds like. And I must mention the fresh air vents as well. We saw these in Minis as well, and lots of air comes through them, so that's good. But yeah, nice comfortable driving position. Mirror slightly wobbly, but nonetheless I hope it stays where I want it to, and we shall check the rear for accommodation. It's locked. Zoom that with there. Oh yes, there's a locking knob, there we go. And oh, we've got hats in the rear and electrical gubbins, but I shall jump aboard now, and I'm going to bravely close the door, get a bit warm in here. But oh, that is a really comfortable seat. It's got a lovely shape to it, and oh, got center armrest here as well. Oh yeah, I mean it's all vinyl, so it's going to get very hot and sticky back here. Behave yourselves. But yeah, at least I've got my louvered rear window, genuine period accessory, and I like the high level brake lights as well, which also have a very much a vibe of older times. Danichi speakers apparently, but yeah, really nice back here. And I'll be a bit gentle with this window winder, because I suspect it is broken at some point. But the window goes all the way down. Woo! No quarter light needed. because the door is entirely within the wheelbase of the car, so the entire glass can drop all the way down. But plenty of knees alert room back here. A little ashtray on this slightly wobbly center armrest. But yeah, I'm going to declare the interior of this car a massive success, and I'm going to get out now because it's really hot. One thing I have just noticed is that the seats have an easy recline option, just a pull lever and back you go. I really like that. A lot of BL stuff tended to have a windy handle, but the handle is on the same side on both seats, which makes me suspect there is absolutely no difference between the driver's and passenger seats. That's clever. That saves money. To say I'm excited about this moment is a massive understatement. I've driven this car less than a mile so far. Oil and ignition lights are present, and both have gone away. We call that an ideal scenario. I'm going to assume the oil pressure gauge isn't connected up. Yep, we're definitely getting a vacuum, we're definitely getting amps. Battery's gently warming up. So we shall say, let's go for a drive. Right hand handbrake, of course. No power steering, but it's not that heavy, to be honest. It is quite low geared. That's the biggest difference between the 1800s and the Mini or BMC 1100, was they did have to gear the steering down just to make it reasonably light. But yeah, power steering not really needed. Through the gates here at Exeter Park, which feels quite an odd thing to say. Exeter Village Market. Oh. Doesn't it sound lovely? Well, we'll do that window up a bit. I have to make the most of my full face ventilation there. Or full through is more the phrase, not full face. But nonetheless, here we are, driving along a road in an Austin Kimberley. A little too quickly, but that's okay, it's going to 100. So that seems like a good challenge. Oh gosh, yeah, she quite happy to get a shift on. I should point out for the more observant amongst you that the tyres are a bit too low in profile for original, so she's going a bit more slowly than the speedo indicates. So if we do that, that's probably a realistic 60 or 100 kilometers, somewhere around there. And fairly peaceful, you have to say. I've got the passenger window right down at the moment. And yeah, it feels very brisk. Feels a little undergeared, I would say. I suppose the low profile tyres don't help much with that, but certainly feels ready to yomp along at great distances. The hydrolastic suspension getting a good workout down this road, lots of repairs, a bit uneven. But yeah, this is really rather pleasant. I'm sure compared to other Australian stuff, which usually had a big 6 of more like 4 litres or even more enormous V8, this feels a little underpowered, but by the standards of a British motorist, this feels quite lively. And of course this engine went on to live in British cars. It was fitted to the British Landcrab and then to the Leyland Princess. Those were the only engines in the UK we got it, sorry, the only cars we got that engine in the UK. But the E6 engine had some very exciting homes here in Australia, and I hope to catch up with a couple more of them on this trip. It was fitted to the Marina, which sounds hilarious, and also the Leyland P76, Leyland's entirely Australian car. That was the entry level in 2.6 litre form. 2.6 litre form, also that used in the Marina. So I got rudely interrupted by my phone there, but the turning circle seems really rather good for a front wheel drive car. That's turning in not very much space. So I think we can declare that more than acceptable. So like I said, the Austin Kimberley and the Tasman, sadly not a huge success, 12,100 built. They began producing them in 1970 and production petered out in December 1972, which is when this very car was built. So this is one of the last ever made. And it made way for the Leyland P76, which was built more to Australian tastes, I think it's fair to say. So the P76, well, we'll take a look at one in a separate video, but that was big rear wheel drive, more what Australians were happy with. This car with its fluid suspension, transverse engine, it was just a bit too odd to catch on really. So it suffered much the same fate as the Landcrab back in the UK. But very comfortable, very easy cruiser. There's a Ford Falcon Ute because we're on Australia. This feels a very competent package. Very vocal transmission when you're slowing down. The engine sounds more vocal as well than the Princess I drove last year, which had the same engine but an automatic transmission. I'd love to throw it through a set of bends, but we're in Australia. They don't seem to know what bends are. Yeah, that little crest caused the car to bounce quite a bit. That's the same issue with sharp undulations as hydraulic Citroens. But there's no gas in a Hydrolastic, it is rubber and fluid combined together. But it certainly feels sure-footed. The steering is requiring no correction as we drive along. It's yeah, a very pleasant car. Sadly there were reliability issues, overheating and head gasket failure, usually around that Siamese pair of cylinders. And of course this is such a hot country as well, so it pushes cooling systems pretty hard. Oh, I'm loving this. I've always been fascinated by the Kimberley because I think this is one of British Leyland's huge could-have-beens. Like I said earlier, they did consider bringing this car to the UK as the Mark III version of the Landcrab. In the end they went just for a minor facelift and the addition of the 6-cylinder engine as an option. But I think what a missed opportunity. I think this car could have done really well in the UK. Just because it is that little bit more conventional. It's your traditional 3-box saloon at a time when that's really what buyers wanted. Oh, that's British Leyland down to a T really. All these might have beens, could have beens. I just never quite managed to get it quite right. They did build a Van Pla version of the Landcrab using this body, so it's got the shorter nose but the longer rear end, and that one was built as a fully fledged prototype, and I'm pleased to say it still exists. It was at the NEC in 2017, and I think it's probably in my show report from that year. It has been lovingly restored, and the owner of this car supplied a rear lamp unit for it, which are very hard to find. It's just such a lovely car to drive. It's so effortless, and you've got all the space in the world down here because there is no transmission tunnel. Some people might bemoan the lack of quarter lights, but open my window again, actually makes it slightly quieter. But yeah, I just like the unbroken visibility. It's absolutely excellent. Oh, here comes some wiggly roads. That is a very ancient sounding transmission, but it's a very sure-footed car. Front wheel drive means it's very predictable, but it steers very nicely. I am having the best day ever. So that was the Austin Kimberley, an Australian developed spin-off from the Landcrab that I wish we had seen in the UK. Really enjoyed driving that. Fantastic to actually achieve that moment and actually get over here and drive it, and I think it lived up to everything I expected. The drive didn't go perfectly, and there will be a separate video on that to come soon, but still I'm in love. I think it's a fabulous car. So I shall say thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and I shall see you in a future video. Farewell. Right then, to say I'm excited about this moment would be it. Whoa! There goes another one for the blooper reel.